The amazing parts of traveling alone, and also the really honest, not so great parts about traveling alone. In today's podcast episode, I'm joined in this series with someone who I'm very excited to do group trips with, Laura Ericson. We talk about how we started traveling alone and some of our huge breakthrough moments, as well as some of our not so great moments of traveling alone, as well as some tips if you're considering it. Whether you take a group trip with us or you just take the trip, we want you to do it. Our love of travel runs deep. So in today's podcast episode, we're going to be bringing in Laura Ericson. But if you're new here, welcome to another episode of Everyday Badassery. I'm your host, Christine Lozada. This is a podcast meant to inspire you to be just 1% more badass today than you were yesterday. And I realized I want to have badass adventures with the community that is attracted to this podcast episode, because if you're listening to this, it means that there might be something a little bit more out of life that you want. And let's go have a badass adventure together with Laura. So let's bring her in.
I'm Laura Ericson. I am from Wisconsin. I live in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and I run a group travel business, and I'm a content creator. All kinds of fun things. Entrepreneur.
Tons of things. Yes.
Yeah.
And you have an opportunity to go on these said group trips with us. We'll be talking about that in this episode series, and there's going to be info in the description for you. But today's episode, we're going to get real pretty, and then we're going to get real ugly talking about solo travel. But I actually would love to start. I would actually love to start exactly at the start, like at the beginning, like your first solo trips. Where were you? Where'd you go? How old were you? What was it like? I'm so curious to hear.
I would say my first solo travel experience was when I was 21. I studied abroad in Segovia, Spain. And so I was obviously in college at the time, but I was the only person from my college who was in this particular program. So, I went to Spain by myself. It was Europe for the first time, meeting up with new classmates from all over the US. So that was like my first, I was young, but that was my first, like, not only just solo travel, but like living abroad experience where I was there for 3 months. And I remember it being really hard. I remember the first few days.
Why?
I remember the first few
That's
days.
young, by the way, super young.
Yeah. I remember the first few days, like I wanted to go home. I didn't think I was going to make it. I got over it, obviously, but I remember kind of like thinking, did I make a mistake in doing this? Like, do I want to go home? I missed my friends. I was a fish out of water in a lot of ways, but I also remember specifically that I picked Spain because I wanted something different. I had traveled in Mexico and Latin America when I was younger, and I wanted to make myself uncomfortable. Like I specifically remember that, like that I was doing this to get myself out of my comfort zone. And I had an amazing time, so much so that I went back after I graduated, and I moved to Madrid that time to get my TEFL to learn how to teach English as a foreign language. Kind of a similar situation, just a little bit more adult form, where I didn't have a school that, I stayed with a host family, by the way, when I first went. So I was like living with this like Spanish grandma. She did my laundry, and I do miss that. She folded my underwear. Amazing.
We all need a grandma that can fold our underwear.
She ironed my underwear. That was amazing.
Hold on. This is a really extreme kind of like first daunt into solo travel, because you were somewhere super foreign. You were somewhere very young, and you were just completely out of your element. And one of the things that I heard you say was like you basically wanted to throw in the towel and give up, and you were able to overcome that. What was like one of the reasons why you were able to continue to stick in it?
I made friends. You first get there, you meet people like they're strangers, and you can hit it off with people, but you still don't know them. But you usually give it a few days, like you're going to connect with people, and then you don't feel quite so lonely. I think if I had gone there and like didn't meet anybody, I probably would have at some point wanted to go home. But I made friends. I have friends that I still talk to. I have friends from that experience that I've visited, I've gone on trips with since. So I think it was very much about the connections that I made. And obviously I went there with a purpose. I wanted to see it through. So I'm not a quitter really in anything in life. So even if things are tough, like I'm a Taurus. It's Taurus season, baby. So I stick shit out even if it's hard. I've always been that way. But yeah, and then I went back a second time and it was a very similar experience. I remember again, like I wanted to go home. I was like, do I want to be here? Like, why am I doing this? I miss my friends. I miss my family. But yeah, those were like two very early on like solo travel experiences. And then I would say most recently, as a true adult, after divorce, right before the pandemic, I took a solo trip to Australia. And I've traveled alone many times in my life. You know, I used to go to conferences. I used to, you know, do work things by myself. Like I've done those things by myself, but this was like, to me, this was different. I found a flight. I remember like laying in bed, I found a flight to Australia for like $650. And I was like,
oh, this was amazing.
yeah. And it was out of my city, which has like a small airport. So I was like, I literally just like impulse bought. And then I was like, I'll figure this out later. Went to work the next day. I went to work the next day. I asked my boss if I could go. I think I was secretly hoping she'd say no. She said yes. So I was like, shit. I guess I'm going to Australia. And I was like, but then the panic set in of like, I'm not going to meet anybody. Like I don't have any plans. I'm not meeting up with a group. I don't have a group of set classmates I'm going to meet that, you know, I just haven't met yet. Like I'm literally going alone. I'm flying alone. It was the longest flight I've ever taken. That was a brutal flight. It was a lot of travel. I was going to multiple cities. Like I had to plan this whole thing by myself. And there was no like guarantee of meeting anybody. To me, that was my first, you know, and I was probably 36 maybe. That was my first like real like solo travel experience. And I wanted to do, again, I wanted to do it to challenge myself. It wasn't something I like was super excited about, to be honest. I was nervous and I was worried, and I was like, but I'm doing it anyway. I'm just like that. Like I force myself to do uncomfortable things. And I had an amazing time. It was a great trip. I did make friends. You know, I went on tours. I met people that I've seen since. But it also made me realize like, this isn't my favorite way to travel. Like, I'm glad I did it. I don't regret doing it, but it wouldn't be my choice to do like an 11-day solo trip by myself.
Yeah, I hear this theme about connections and how like these places became meaningful to you as a result of connecting with some of the people there. And I'll share a story as well around a time I was feeling extremely lonely in Vietnam. But to bring it back, like I'm listening to your first solo trip and I'm like, damn, like she went far and foreign and young in Spain. I think that's amazing. Like my first true solo trips weren't until I was, you know, traveling alone for work. And I remember like as a child, when I would travel with my family, I would always try to like venture off by myself so I can have like these alone adventures. I've always wanted to travel alone, but like was always afraid to. And it wasn't until I was in my very, very early 20s, I was working for Walmart.com. And at that time, I had to take the corporate jet once a month to go to corporate office, Bentonville, Arkansas. And I was super young. I would go by myself on the corporate jet. I would go take my meetings and all the things. And I felt really out of my element in the sense that, you know, I was living in San Francisco at the time, and I would go to Arkansas, which is very different in terms of culture, still within the United States. But I was like there on business. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't really like venturing off and adventuring around some cool and foreign place. I don't feel like I had my first real solo trip, and it wasn't even foreign either until I did my big breakup trip. And now fast forward, I'm now in my mid-20s. I was doing long distance between San Francisco. I was dating a guy in Washington, D.C. He's a total masshole. If you don't know what a masshole is, it's an asshole from Massachusetts, which is like the worst kind of asshole that's possible. And he, like, if I said he broke me, like, that's an understatement. I don't even know who the F I was anymore. Like, I lost myself. I felt like I was no longer a confident woman. I didn't feel like I had a sense of independence. I didn't feel like I could do anything on my own. Like I just felt like I lost myself. And I decided at that time that I was going to start traveling to a place I was so curious about alone to go find myself. And that's New York City. So I was living in San Francisco in my mid-20s, and I would travel to New York once a month. I would go for a 3-day weekend, and I would go with no plans and just get lost in the city as a purpose of finding myself. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting about these trips is like, even though I was completely alone, it was so many of the connections that I made that helped me to find myself. Like I'm listening to your story and I'm like, it wasn't me like roaming around Fifth Avenue or looking at like, the ice skating rink in the Rockefeller Center that helped me to find myself. Mm-hmm. It was interacting with different people. And you're going to laugh at me for this one, because one of the ways I found myself was pretending I was someone else. And so I would put on this identity. And a lot of people have heard me talk about Lila. Lila is my alter ego. And when you would meet her on the street, she was a different person every time. So you'd be like, oh, like, where do you live? I'd be like, I'm from Mexico City. They're like, oh, do you speak Spanish? Like, si habla español, but like wouldn't give any more than that. And then it would just be like something different. Like, what do you do for work? I'm a flamenco dancer. And it's like, oh shit, wait, that's the wrong country, whatever. Right. And it would just be this way of me playing with people. And it would like, and these are interactions where it's not like I'm forming a lifelong relationship. This is like me sitting at Momofuku Noodle Bar talking to someone for 20 minutes who's sitting next to me.
Who you're never going to see again.
Exactly. And it helps me to build my confidence by traveling alone to this immensely humongous, busy city where you can feel very alone, but connecting with people in this really kind of bizarre way to like re-find myself. And it's interesting. So I did this for like years until I finally just moved to New York City, and then was Christine Lozada when I actually finally got there.
What is your real name? Like, who are you?
I know, right? Who are you really? But like, so this is where we started with solo travel. And obviously we have evolved since then. And so I would love to jump to like, we'll keep it on the positive note before we jump to a little bit more of the not so positive stuff, which is maybe like, and like, I kind of touched on one of my own breakthrough moments, right? Where it's like, I started traveling alone, and it was with this purpose of like refinding myself and refinding my confidence, and just like loving myself again. What would you say is like a breakthrough solo travel moment for you?
Yeah, I had, when you were talking about your mass hole, I don't know what you call a mass hole from Miami.
If you have a suggestion on this, please,
girl,
please tell us.
Don't do it. I had actually, this is right around the time of my Australia trip, but I started dating a guy from Miami, and yeah, it was a huge mistake. He ruined me, but also motivated me in the best way, because I don't think I would be where I am or have my business if it wasn't for this guy. So,
I just got goosebumps, right?
So if you're listening, asshole, thank you. But for real, like this is in COVID of all times. Like he ruined me, like pulled the rug out from under me, and I was so sad, and like I felt no purpose. I was so devastated, and it didn't help that it was during like massive lockdowns. I live alone. I was working remotely from home. I didn't have my coworkers. This is when like we were like, putting signs up in the window to talk to our friends. I remember my birthday in 2020, like I hung a piñata outside this tree, and my friends came by and were like batting at it, and I was watching from the window. Like this is because we thought like we were gonna die if we, breathe the same air. This is the time that this was. So it was bad time to go through a breakup. And my big moment was like realizing, I remember I went to therapy, and my therapist was like, well, you just, to get over a breakup, you have to do the things you love, and, all those cliche things. And I was like, but I love to travel, and I can't. I was like, the one thing that would help me right now, that would be my escape and help me get through this and help me heal, like, I can't do it. I can't do it at all. I can barely even leave my house right now. And so it was so, so hard, but also made me realize like how important travel was to me. And so as soon as I possibly could, I started going everywhere. I took a trip to Colombia in early 2021, and this was when things were still, sketchy, but we had vaccines and things were opening up a little bit. So I went to Colombia, and I just realized, I was like, this is it for me. Like, this is what I need. And this isn't just for me. Like, so many people need travel to escape, to evolve, to grow, to get over things. Like, that was like my aha moment of like, I need to travel more, and not just for vacation. Like, I need it all the time. 2 weeks a year is not enough for me. And I had planned that trip to Colombia for a girl I met in a Facebook group. We actually met in a breakup group.
I should have been in that group.
Embarrassing. But we bonded over getting dumped on the same day, whatever. So I told her, I was like, I'm planning this trip to Colombia, but I really don't want to go alone. Not only do I not want to go alone, but like, everyone was kind of in my head about like, you can't go to Colombia alone as a woman. It's too dangerous, whatever. So she agreed to come with me, and I said I would plan out the whole trip and she could just come along for the ride, so I'm not alone. And we did that. And that's when I remember telling her, I was like, I have this crazy idea to quit my job, start a travel business, and basically do this for other people, so that one, I'm fulfilling my own need of getting to travel more and getting to see other places, but also like recognizing that there's a need for other people like her who want to travel, but have no desire to plan it, maybe don't even have the knowledge or the skill to plan it, but they want to go. They just don't want to have to do the work. And so like, that is when my business was born. It was on this trip to Colombia. I didn't think I was actually going to do it. It was one of those like, hey, like, I have this crazy idea.
But you do the fucking scary and hard things, which I love about you. And you did it.
Yeah. And it was a trip after that to Turkey. I was in a hot air balloon with my friend. And I literally remember like I'm quitting my job when I get home. Like, I'm doing it. All these things happen like when I'm traveling. These aren't things, I don't find that I make these big decisions when I'm at home. Like, it's usually when I'm doing something crazy somewhere in the world, and I have this like amazing perspective of like, my God, just freaking do it. Like, all this other shit doesn't matter.
But when you are so out of your normal day to day, that's when you can have those moments of realization, when everything is foreign around you and you can spend time with yourself and your thoughts and just be out there experiencing new things. It makes you reevaluate your life. Absolutely. And it's not surprising to me, you have those aha moments when you're traveling. I feel exactly the same way.
Yeah. I mean, I remember I was at an Adele concert in Barcelona when I decided I was leaving my husband. I literally remember like staring at Adele, and I was like, this is it. Like, when I get home, I'm getting a divorce.
Are you going to try to ask Adele to go out afterwards?
Will you marry me? Yeah, I don't know. Like, but I've just always had those like very, very powerful moments, like while I am somewhere. And sometimes when I'm at home, I'm kind of like, whatever. You just get stuck in the day to day.
Yeah, it's true.
You get in a new environment around different people, and you see the possibilities more than you sometimes see them at home.
And spoiler alert, this podcast series is meant to inspire you to come have your aha moment with us. Like, let's go adventure together, right? Let's connect and have some amazing experience together, but also have that moment, where we can reflect back on like, what is going on with our lives? Like, how is our day to day that we get so used to different than what we're experiencing in this moment? And are we happy with where we're currently at? Because those aha moments come in those times when we're traveling. And connections are everything, whether it's with the places, and the people that you're meeting while you're there, or with the people that you're traveling with. Because, one of my aha moments, when I was traveling alone, this was like one of my breakthrough moments. So I was in Vietnam. feeling beyond lonely. I was in Vietnam for 3 weeks by myself, and I wasn't spending time in like super touristy places. I was jumping on overnight buses and kind of like traveling throughout all of Vietnam, stopping in different places. And I kind of had like two moments during my 3 weeks in Vietnam where I was just like, oh, wow. I love riding bicycles, and I rented a bike and I was riding along the beach, and I'd been riding for like 3 hours until I realized like, oh wow, I should probably turn around. This is gonna be a really long bike ride. And I'd stopped, and I had not spoken to anybody in an entire week. Cause like over there, it's not like, oh, everyone speaks English. Like,
Right.
no, nobody speaks English. And there's nothing about Vietnamese that sounds like English. So like, even if we were to try like, oh, that word's kind of similar to, no, like nothing is similar. I felt like a foreigner in a foreign place, and I was feeling
Mm-hmm.
very lonely, and I was enjoying this amazing bike ride, this amazing view all by myself. And I stopped and I was having a drink of water, and there was this group of like 15 or so, super young, probably like exactly 20 and 21-year-old people, like kids sitting on the beach. At this time, I think I was like 27. And they're like, like, come join us. Like they saw me. They're like, come join us. And I was like, okay. And so like I pushed my bike onto the beach and like sat, and they were sitting in a circle on the beach, and they were they were eating these dried fish snacks, like super nasty dried fish snacks, and smoking cigarettes. And I don't enjoy the taste of dried fish snacks nor cigarettes. And they really, like, they don't speak any English. They really wanted me to have some fish snacks and smoke cigarettes with them. And they really wanted to talk, but I didn't speak any Vietnamese. And there was one girl that could speak like very broken English. And in that moment, I was like, wow, I have been feeling really lonely for this entire week. And this is the closest I had to an interaction with somebody. And I was like, this is so funny that I'm doing two things. I ended up smoking cigarettes and eating those fish snacks. Like I was doing two things I absolutely did not want to do, and had the best time doing it. And like, it's amazing how much you can connect with somebody just by sharing a moment, being in a different environment, at least for me, and like sharing laughs and eye contact. There's so much you can say with a smile, and there's so much you can say with other gestures versus just being able to have a conversation. And so like my breakthrough moment there was like, wow, like even in these foreign places, like traveling alone is awesome, but I really needed to like have this connection in that moment. And it was literally right after that I was like, I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to go fly back to, not Hanoi, back to Ho Chi Minh. And I was like, I need to speak to someone in English. Like and actually, sorry, I kept traveling for another week after that before I made this decision. So now I'd gone 2 weeks without having an English conversation. And I went back and I went to the biggest hotel, like the nicest hotel, booked myself a room there, and immediately went to the bar because I knew that some American businessman was going to be sitting at that bar ready to have a chat. And I was like, I'm just going to do it. And I ended up, I mean, everyone talks about how small the world is. And I'm like, the world is very, very tiny, in my opinion. I ended up sitting with someone who also lived in San Francisco, knew a lot of my coworkers from, at that time, Walmart.com. And we ended up sitting and talking at the bar for like 3 hours. It was amazing. And I was like, it was so amazing to speak English and talk about, he had been traveling through Vietnam for quite some time. And obviously by then it was 2 weeks in, and to be able to connect about our experiences, because it's one thing to have those experiences alone and hold them with you. And it's another thing to be able to connect with someone in that foreign place and share what kind of an experience you're having. And I know this sounds extreme, but I bring it up a lot on this podcast because it's like, what is the biggest punishment that we in America have for people who have broken the law or done bad things? I mean, the very first one is the death sentence, right? Like that's the absolute worst one. But the one that's right behind that is solitary confinement. It's solitary confinement. It's taking you away from people and making you truly be alone. And I think about that in the concept of solo travel, because it's like, there is this push and pull of how we really want to be alone. We really want to be out there solo. But at the same time, as human beings, we are meant to be together, connecting and sharing experiences together. Cause like, that's what life is all about, right? Oh, okay.
Absolutely.
That was my breakthrough moment.
No, and I think I think that's a good, I know you never talked about this, but like, I always talk about like, what is solo travel? Like, what does that
Yeah,
really mean? Like, what is the definition of it? Because
let's talk about it.
I feel like people have, I think people have something in their mind. It's like, so it can only be solo travel if you are going alone and like have no plans to meet anybody. And I think people picture solo travel as it's me with my little guidebook wandering around a city by myself. Like that's solo travel. But
Right.
like also I feel like I've challenged my own beliefs of like what solo travel is the more I do group travel because
Hmm.
and I know I've mentioned this to you before, but I had a woman who she's a single mom, she has 3 boys. I remember before she came on I think her first trip, she's done like 5 trips with me. She's a lifer, but her first one I think was Vancouver, Canada. And I remember her posting on Facebook as she was like getting on her plane and she was like, I'm on my first solo trip. I'm so excited. And I remember thinking like solo trip, like this isn't a solo trip. This is a group trip. But
Yeah.
then the more I thought about it, I was like, this is solo for her. You know,
Hmm.
she was on a plane for the first time by herself. Flying alone can be really, really scary for a lot of people. People tell me that all the time. She was going to meet people she had never met before. Like for her, this is like me when I was 21 going to Spain. She was traveling by herself for the first time. And I think, you know, when you think about it, it's like nobody's really alone when they're traveling
Hmm.
solo. You're surrounded by people, you're probably talking to people, you're likely going on tours, you're making friends. So like who says that solo travel has to be like completely alone? Like nobody
Yeah.
really travels solo to not meet people. It's
Hmm.
just, you know, the different mechanisms you use to meet people, whether it's a group you're signing up for or a tour you're taking, or if you go to a bar knowing that you're going to connect with a businessman, like you're doing it, like you said, to form connections with people. Unless you're, you know, one of my friends, she does like go out into the woods and pop up
Yeah,
a
I was
tent
like, I guess, yeah, going into the
and,
woods,
you know,
hiking.
and like sit by yourself. Like, okay, that's like another level of solitary, you know, solo travel.
Yeah,
But
you want to be solo because when the bears come through or the lions come through, you're like, no, I'm by myself, please.
yeah, and I think like it's okay to want the time for yourself, of course, but like I feel like most people when they're traveling solo are doing it with the intention of meeting people. It's just the unknown of
Yeah.
who am I going to meet? You know, I'm
Yeah.
not going with my friends. And quite honestly, like sometimes when I travel with my friends, they're not the best trips. Um, it's going to be real. Like just because you love people and they're your friends and family don't mean that you are the most
Facts.
compatible when it comes to travel.
Facts. That is so true. I recently just came off of a trip. I was on a cruise. I was on Virgin Voyages. For those who watch my content, you know I'm more or less permanently on Virgin Voyages. I just got off. We'll get back on in a couple days. But one of the things that I did, even though on this one I was not traveling alone, the last three I traveled alone, but I was with my mom. And the first thing I did was I brought my mom to the solo sailor meetup where all of the cruisers who are there alone or traveling alone come together and they hold it on the first night because so that you can connect and meet other people. And what I really wanted was my true intention. Well, my true intention was twofold. One, I genuinely wanted to meet other people and see who was on the trip. And two, I wanted my mom, who's never traveled alone. So even like when she flew out to Florida to meet me, the only times my mom has ever flown alone is anytime she's come out to see me. Otherwise, she's always traveling with my dad. So like that was her alone moment to the point where like I actually texted her because she had a layover. I was like, when you get out of your flight, you will be at gate B6. You're going to be taking a left and then your next gate is at B18, which is going to be on the right side. Like I'm doing the maps and stuff for her so that she knows where to go because she's not used to traveling alone or needing to navigate on her own. But I brought her so that she could meet other solo travelers and get their perspective and their background and stories. And there were a lot of women there that I could relate with where they were, you know, I'm 40 and they were recently divorced and they were there to just have a trip for themselves. You know, like this is my time and I'm going to do what I want. And on that same note, I want to know who else is here and who I can connect with if I want to connect with people and have shared experiences with people.
Mm-hmm.
And it was this interesting push and pull of being alone. And one of the ladies that I specifically spoke to, Kelly, because I had made a video about traveling alone, because for a lot of people, and we're about to dive into the not so pretty side of traveling alone. And it was interesting because Kelly came up to me and she was like, I listened to your traveling alone on Virgin Voyages video, and my biggest fear, and I thought she was going to say, was just being alone. Her biggest fear was safety, which was fascinating to me because I'm like, yo, you're on a cruise with
Right.
with a humongous security staff, like everywhere. Like, this is probably one of the safest ways. But I paused on that because I was like, wait a minute. And I listened to her story, and she's never traveled alone before. And she had hesitations. And what's interesting is that, like, I knew some people might feel that way. And so I had saved some stories about how I specifically, especially when I'm going out at night, even on cruise ships, how I conduct myself. I basically let the security guards, whether at a nightclub in New York City when I'm at the nightclub alone, or in Boston, or wherever it might be, or even on the cruise ship, I let them know who I am. It's like, hey, like you say hi to them, I'm traveling alone. And so they just know, so that if throughout the night, at 2 a.m., if for some reason I just kind of saunter over to them and stay near them, like, they know what's up. Like, they know something's probably wrong and can help me out in that situation. And I'd share these stories. I pushed them to the very end of my video because I didn't think it'd be relevant for people. But she was like, that was one of the most important stories. And what helped me to feel safe, whether, going out to the nightclubs alone on Virgin Voyages or just being on the ship in itself alone. And, I compare that to having the cartel after me while I was in Tulum, Mexico very recently. But I would love to hear from you first, like the not so pretty side, like of times that you've traveled alone, because, and a spoiler alert, if you're listening to this, like every time I've traveled alone and I've had issues with safety, I've always been able to overcome them. And I think you can probably relate to this as well. But it's just a different environment when you're with other people, and when you have like that security in masses. But whether it's safety or elsewhere or another topic, the negative side of traveling alone.
Yeah, I will say I haven't had a lot of issues with safety, but I also think that's because I'm mindful. I don't try to put myself in those situations to begin with. I've been on some sketchy dates while I've been traveling. That's a whole nother episode. we put a pin in that one. Dating.
We might have to film that one.
Dating in foreign countries. Oh my God. Yeah. I've had some situations like that where it's like, I'm trying to, I admittedly will use like Bumble when I travel to meet somebody, not because I want to go on a date, but because it's meeting a local, you get to, sometimes they show you cool things. Like, I've had really great experiences with that, but I've also had some like not so great experiences where I'm like, oof, that probably wasn't the best idea. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. So yeah, I just think like you never really know like what situation you're going to be in. And I think just being alone, especially as a woman, like sometimes that does make you more of a target. Whereas from my experience in my groups, I've ran maybe 12 group trips. Like, we haven't had any issues. Yeah. And I think a lot of that is because I tell people like, please, yes, you can do whatever you want, but like, I don't recommend going out by yourself at night. Like, I think it's better to be with somebody. And, generally we're traveling around with a group. A lot of times we have a guide or a driver. We have somebody watching out for us. We have a local. I think like just having that strength in numbers, like, wards off a lot of issues versus when you're alone. I think people are just more likely to try things on you. I also just, I've had moments like that solo trip where I literally remember I was sitting in Melbourne, drinking an espresso martini, eating a pizza by myself.
This is freaking fabulous, by the way.
It was, but it was. But I had a moment like this little bird flew over to me and I was sharing my pizza with this bird, and I was like taking some pictures. I have pictures of this bird eating my pizza.
Oh, it's literally a bird. This isn't
like a real bird. I'm an animal lover. Like, I will feed any animal. I pick animals over people all the time, but I had a bird at my table, and then I remember like feeling sorry for myself. Is this what my life has come to? Like, I'm literally dining with a bird right now. Because I remember like I was in that place of like, you're looking around, you see couples eating together, you see friends together, you see people laughing. And I wanted that, and I didn't have it. Like, there wasn't really, and sometimes it's hard to break your way into a group because those people aren't necessarily looking to meet more people because they're already together. And so it was just one of those days where like I wanted to meet somebody and it wasn't happening. And sometimes, yeah, you can try to create that, And a lot of times it works, but sometimes you just don't meet people. Like sometimes you don't click with people. Sometimes the groups don't have any interest in like adding, like that was great that people added you and invited you to their group, but sometimes that doesn't happen. And so sometimes like it's like what you want is to meet somebody and it just like the stars don't align. And I remember that was one of those days where it was like, cool, I'm meeting with a bird. Like it was a humbling experience.
It's really funny. I'm laughing because your experience makes me think of, it kind of makes me think of pickleball. Because I spent the summer, I spent 3 months while on a filming tour playing pickleball across the United States. And it's like, you show up and I'm like dying to meet other people, both from a please play pickleball with me perspective, but also from a like, give me local tips and hang out with me perspective. And sometimes it really works out. And sometimes it does not work out at all. And you never know what you're going to get. But I haven't dined with a bird yet. Maybe I should add that to my bucket list of things I hope to do when I solo travel.
Everyone should do it at least once.
I will say, like, for me, even on the bad side, so I have my own fair share of safety experiences solo traveling, but it has also helped me to gain, like, I actually, this is the way I want to say it, a style of confidence that takes me into my everyday life, standing a little bit taller and a little bit stronger, and you don't really F with me type of vibe. Like I know how to give off that vibe, especially when I'm traveling alone. And it goes beyond just having RBF, right? Resting bitch face will only get you so far. But if you walk with confidence and you speak with confidence and you talk to people in a certain way when you're traveling alone, especially in a foreign country, it just changes the dynamic of who's going to mess with you. Yet at the same time, because I travel alone in Tulum, Mexico, and I've made content and videos. I have videos about this, about my tips for traveling alone. There are even things like if I am choosing to, and it's not all the time, whether I'm just dining out alone late nights, maybe there's some live music I'm staying for. I'm not talking about going out and getting hammered until 5 a.m. That's Vegas. Actually, I should probably list a lot of places, but anyway, that's something else. But regardless, I will always make sure that I am wearing a style of shoes that night that I can run in because I will jog home. I will always jog back to the place I'm staying to, whether I need to or not. No headphones on. I put my hood up. I'm looking directly forward and I do a light jog back. And if it's like, wow, you really ate way too many tacos, Christine, then yes, it can become a brisk walk. But, your girl can do full all-out sprint in 6-inch stilettos. Like I've done it before many times. But like, it's just one of the ways that I will safely get home each time. And I know I will be good. And yet at the same time, traveling alone, I shared this story recently on my drone channel is, sometimes I'm not doing anything wrong. And in this instance, like I'm traveling alone through Mexico as a woman with my drone. And like, I'm oftentimes, in kind of like, sometimes in popular places, but sometimes not so much. And over there, it's like you have a lot of corrupt police or you have the cartel who know that you currently have an object that's worth a lot of money and they are going to put you in a not so fun situation. And it's interesting because a lot of people don't believe me. And I'm just like, I don't really care if you believe me or not, but I have no reason to lie about this. And I was recently in a situation in which I was startled by someone who was demanding bribe money from me, and it caused me to drop the drone that I was literally just hand launching in that moment. And so it only fell, I'm not that tall. It only fell like 5.5 feet to the ground, right? Like it fell as soon as I let go of it. And so I was able to fix it just fine. And getting out of I don't want to talk a lot about this situation, but I mean, I was able to get myself out of that situation by holding myself confidently, doing the RBF and having crisp US money in my drone bag to get out of that situation. But at the same time, it's like, I never have issues flying my drone and traveling and capturing the content I need when I'm with other people. Whether I'm with Meatball or I'm with other content creators, like there is something about having power in numbers where you just don't get messed with in the same way. And a lot of times I will save things like flying my drone or going out and maybe drinking a little bit too much for when I'm with other people, because we can have that power in numbers. And I don't rely on that. I still have all my wits around me, but there's just, you can all hold hands and punch someone in the face together. I'm just kidding. Maybe I'm kidding. Maybe I'm not.
Yeah, absolutely. I just recently, I went to Georgia for a conference, like Georgia, the country. And again, as a savvy traveler, person who travels all the time, I was still like, okay, I'm in a very different place that I'm not familiar with. I had read some things online that were like, I was a little worried about like walking alone at night, things like that. So, I mean, I also I went and bought a birdie safety alarm. Do you know what those are?
Oh, duh. Yes, I know what that is, because when I was recently traveling with someone, it went off all the time.
Mine hasn't gone off yet, and that is my fear because I have it in my purse. I've never had to use it.
Describe what a birdie alarm is for somebody was like, what are you talking about?
Like the most high pitched, like make your ears bleed type of sound. You basically like in theory, I would walk alone at night and hold on to it. And if somebody tried to mess with me, I would pull it and they would probably run away and cry because it's so obnoxious.
This is very, very accurate. So imagine exactly what Laura's talking about, and imagine traveling with someone whose birdie kept going off on accident.
Oh God.
And I probably have, I have heard
bite.
Bring me
but
back
that is like my worst fear. It sits in the bottom of my purse. I'm like, one of these days I'm going to be on like a fucking airplane and this thing's going to go off and I'm going to be mortified. But so far so good. And I honestly don't even use it, but it was like the fact that I had it. And and then I also bought, and I'm not a paranoid person. Like I'm not a scared traveler by any means. I also bought like a door alarm, like you put under your door in your hotel room so that if somebody tries to open the door, like, cause like technically like staff have your room key. Yeah. And I actually had somebody like while I was sleeping, like open my room in Morocco. I think it was an accident, but it kind of made me a little like,
yeah.
So I got like a door alarm to put under my door. And then if somebody tried to open my door, it would go off. So like I had those things with me. I didn't really use them. After a couple of days, I even stopped using the door alarm, but it was just like an extra thing to make me like, okay, if I need these tools, I have them with me. It's just an extra like layer. So I don't know. I just think there's like so many ways you can obviously be mindful and protect yourself. And there's also tools out there to help protect you as well.
That's true. Okay. I know how I want to end this podcast episode. For somebody who has not yet taken the solo trip, but is considering it, like I think I should travel alone. Let's leave them with a little bit of wisdom. Like if you were to go back and give yourself some advice for traveling alone and like how to get started and how to plan that first trip, what would you say?
I think if it's really intimidating for someone, obviously like you can join a group trip. But if you just really
join our group trip.
But if you really want to have like a, true solo experience where you're not meeting up with people, like I always say, like go do a weekend, even go do a day, go to a city an hour away. Like I live in Eau Claire. I'm an hour and a half from Minneapolis. Like if it were me, I would go to Minneapolis and like go take myself out on a date and, go eat alone. Try sitting in a restaurant by yourself in your city and see how it feels, or in a city nearby where you don't know anybody, where you're not going to run into your friends, and just see what that feels like to, they say like date yourself, sit alone, because it is a sometimes uncomfortable and yet empowering experience to sit by yourself. A lot of people will say like, oh, I can't eat alone. And it's like, but why? Like you can't enjoy your own company. So I think like trying that in a small doses and kind of like working your way up, then do a weekend by yourself, and then maybe you're ready for the 11-day trip to Australia. You don't want to like throw yourself into that if that's not who you are, and then be miserable. Cause I do see women on like Facebook groups that are like
that all the time.
And they're like, I'm so sad. I'm sitting here alone and I regret not going with a group and whatever. So I think like, make sure that, build up your confidence and make sure that it's something that you actually enjoy doing. Cause it's also okay to not enjoy it. It's okay to not want to do solo travel. Like it's not
Yeah.
for everybody. I encourage everybody to do it in some context, but it doesn't have to be the way that you travel.
Yeah. I'm listening to you and I'm like, that's the whole premise of this podcast, right? It's the just 1% more badass to get to those big moments. And I see too often people taking the humongous foreign trip as their first solo trip. And it's a lot of time. It's a lot of money and it's a lot of crying. Like that's what I hear time and time again. And it's like,
Same.
well, did you try like the 1%? Like,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of people are like, I don't like to eat by myself. And it's like, well, this is going to be hard for you. And so my suggestion would be like you, right? Start small in your own hometown. Start small in the cities that are next to you. And if you are choosing to go take that bigger or a more foreign meaning other country or not other country, then set yourself up for success by small things that feel group like. You know what I mean? Where it's, take a tour. Don't take don't take the gondola tour where you're going to feel like, oh, wow, I'm so alone and there's so many couples around me. Like take the tour where it's like eat with, where you're dining in somebody's home and they've made a meal for you with a lot of other people, where you're in a group environment speaking with both locals and tourists. Or like when I was in Japan, I did a bar crawl. It was so fun. We went to 4 different bars and 2 different nightclubs, and we were with an entire group of 60 people where it was like specific games that allowed us to be social with each other and meet each other. So by the end of the night, I mean, you didn't have 60 friends. There was a lot of people. Like I met like 10 really solid people I created new memories with. Or, and the best yet, and join us in the next podcast episode, which is about group trips, because you can play with your amount of, hey, there's a little bit of free time. Let me go explore on my own. And let's come back to the group and connect with, an entire group plus 2 super badass travelers right here, Christine and Laura. So we'll join us in that next episode. Laura, where can people find you?
Well, right now, Eau Claire, Wisconsin, but online you can find me. Where am I? My website is lauraericson.com, ERICSON, and Instagram, Lola Whiskey, Facebook, I'm on there. You can find me. If you Google my name, you'll find me.
If you enjoyed today's podcast episode, please share it. If you're considering even a little bit a group trip, make sure you check out the show notes below. And if you felt something, please connect with us. I'm at Christine Lozada everywhere. Lola at Lola Whiskey is where you can find her website. Again, everything's in the show notes for you. Go forth, be badass, take a solo trip, or join us in the next episode about group trips. We'll see you in the next adventure. Ciao.